Hello and welcome to the Radiate Wellness Podcast with your host, metaphysician, Reiki master, and hypnotherapist, Christy Clemens Hoffman. Each week, we will discover teachings, tips, and tools to radiate your best life ever with practitioners, authors, and luminaries to help you on your path. Wellness, joy, peace, abundance. What do you want to radiate?
Hello, welcome back to the Radiate Wellness Podcast. Today, we radiate community with Jennifer Henczel, the repeat guest. You may remember Jennifer from episode 324, I believe it was, of the Radiate Wellness Podcast last October. And Jennifer is an award-winning leader, a best-selling author, speaker, podcaster, founder of Inspired Influencers, and the Women in Podcasting VIP Club. Jennifer's mission is to lift women's voices and stories globally. And I am very happy to have you here today. How are you doing today, Jennifer?
Oh, so good. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So my listeners, if you notice a slight accent, Jennifer is from Canada, one of our neighbors to the north. So it's good to have you.
Yes, Vancouver, BC, Canada.
Oh, beautiful part of the world. All right. The Women Podcasters Network. You've been doing this for some time.
Yes. So for 5 years, I've had the network and it's growing and growing, and more podcasters are being created. Before 2020, there was only 1 million podcasts, and now we're over 5 million podcasts, and there's still lots of room to grow because if you think about it, there's over billions of websites. And so 5 million doesn't look like that many, there's still lots of room to grow. And podcasts are really a critical part of community, and communities can use podcasts to grow and thrive. And so I'm really excited about all the developments, and I get to meet such amazing people like you.
Yeah, this is really wonderful. I do love podcasting. Having 2 podcasts, I clearly love it. I love the medium. People will ask, why don't you do radio? It's because with radio, you've got to be there at a certain time. You've got to wrap up at a certain time. With podcasting, we can record whenever. We can post it weekly, monthly, decide when we want to post it. So it's a much easier and forgiving form, I do think. And I do think that it builds community, which you are doing so wonderfully with what you're doing. So can you tell us a bit about the community that you're building?
Thank you so much. The Women Podcasters Network is for women podcasters plus expert guests. And then now we've brought on, last year we started the Women Podcasters Awards.
Yes.
And you're in the awards. Both of your shows are in the awards.
Yes, we are. The Radiate Wellness Podcast is in the wellness category, and Real Life Angel Encounters is in the storytelling category.
And you're so good. You're such a great podcaster, and you've brought so many wonderful stories into the world and introduced people to so many community builders. And that's what it's all about. Human connection is so important. And now in our last episode, I told you about how a near-death accident with my husband brought us into the podcasting world and made us want to podcast about the story. And then we interview other people about their stories. And that's our first podcast, Inspiring Innovators show. And then now I have the Women Podcasters show. And so I'm really excited to be podcasting and meeting other podcasters. And so in the community, it's podcasters and expert guests. And then in the awards, we also have categories for producers and broadcasters, because of course that's opening up to people who podcasts have an RSS feed. And so that's for the sound, and that's just a term for how it's distributed. But there's a lot of broadcasters out there that don't have technically an RSS feed or a technical podcast. They're doing channels on TikTok, YouTube, other places, Instagram. And so those are important too, people that are producing content on those platforms. And so we want to highlight those under the broadcaster category.
No, that's a great idea. No, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of people who do regular spots, regular videos, regular interviews on these other medias that are necessarily strictly podcasts, but those should count for something as well.
Yes. And it's all about elevating women's voices globally and in the podcasting industry. And so we want to highlight women's voices through the awards. And so we invite people to nominate their show and themselves as a podcaster or an expert guest, producer, or broadcaster.
Broadcaster, absolutely. And this has grown so much from last year, hasn't it?
Yes. So last year we had almost 400 nominees and 15,000 votes. And that was a great first year. We had a lot of support from the podcasting industry, some amazing sponsors. And so it's going to be even better and bigger this year. And I'm really excited about that.
Oh, that is super exciting. And then also the number of categories, you've restructured that a little bit. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so we had 38 last year, and this year we narrowed it down to 25. So we took a lot of feedback from last year and made some tweaks to make it even better this year. And that was one of them, is to make the categories just a little fewer. And then some of the other changes are that we added the producer category for behind the scenes, because those are important folks too that help us get our shows out there, right?
Right. I know I've got two wonderful producers with mindbodyspirit.fm that help with both of the shows. And we couldn't do any of this without them. The producers are very important. And of course, broadcasters as well. What made you decide that you wanted to do an awards season?
Yeah, well, a lot of podcasters struggle with growth and monetizing, but this is an opportunity, a collaborative opportunity, because it's a people's choice style of awards, which is where people can rally their listeners to get them to vote for their podcast and for them as a podcaster. And so it's another way that gives podcasters a way to engage their audience and to reach out to them. And so it's a real community effort. Everything I do has community at the core. And I want to help others to foster and nurture communities around their message and around their shows. And so that's what it's all about. And all of us get to connect with each other and network. And that's just a joy to me, for everybody to meet each other and connect with each other.
Right. And you have several avenues for that to happen. Can you tell us about those?
So we have an international women's event coming up where we will highlight all the podcasters in there and the expert guests and the producers. Anybody in the community can come on that show and introduce themselves and tell people where they can connect with them. And so we feature everybody who shows up to that event through our podcast and our channel and our socials. And so we'll share those. And then we also have other events, other networking events, and then we'll have the awards ceremony. And that's always exciting with the winners. Sponsorships are open too. The sponsors get to present an award, and that's really exciting. It was, if you haven't seen it yet, the ceremony from last year is a really fun event, really exciting. When people win, they were so excited, and the sponsors were so excited to present the awards. So that's really fun. And then inside the group, there's lots of opportunities for podcasters to connect with expert guests and expert guests to connect with podcasters to find podcasts and shows to be on and be interviewed. And so there's lots of different connection things like that. We have groups on LinkedIn and Facebook.
Oh, that's wonderful. And can you tell us how women podcasters can find those groups?
Yeah, so if you go to womenpodcasters.com, you can find the awards, you can find a link to all the groups, and we'd love to connect with you for sure. Community is so important. I love that saying, a rising tide lifts all boats. When we move together, greater things can happen. When you walk alone, you can go fast, but when you walk together, you can go far, right? Yeah, exactly. And so we can make more of an impact together is all it means. Yeah, that means a lot to me. And so growing communities around your message is so important because everybody has that message in their heart just burning to get out. And when we connect with each other, there's more of an opportunity to spread the word about whatever you want to get out there. And so that's been really important to me, is growing communities. We talked last time about how that near-death accident really opened something up in me where it was really hard for us, but at the same time, it kind of helped me for the stuff that was in me to shine and to finally break out and break free from my full-time job and start my own business full-time. And that really helped me to take care of my husband. And then it also helped me to take care of myself too with my health conditions. And so it's just been wonderful. Since 2012, I've been full-time just with my own business. I haven't worked for anyone since. And so I just find it amazing. But for me, I was able to do that when I finally embraced the idea of community.
And for those who have not listened to your previous episode before, can you tell us in a nutshell what that near-death experience was that got you into podcasting in the first place?
Yeah, for sure. Well, for a long time, I was working a full-time job and my business was a side gig at night. And I was at my full-time job and I got this phone call. It was the worst phone call anyone can receive. And it was my husband's boss. And he said that my husband was in a very bad accident and I had to come to the hospital right away. And when I got there, I didn't even recognize him. He had been crushed by 15,000 pounds of wood.
Oh, my goodness.
And so That really blew up our lives. But at the same time, like I said, it kind of ignited something in me that made me want to really live my passion and my purpose. I was always putting the things I was most passionate about on the furthest back burner. Have you ever done that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Oh, so I'll get to it. I'll get to it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the state I was in.
Almost like it's too big to put.
Yes.
I've got to take care of all of these other things. That's a really big thing. I'll get to that sometime.
Exactly. And that can go on for years, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It can go on for years and years. And so one of the things that really impacted me was some of the communities my husband was involved in before his accident came around and rallied around and really supported us. That really surprised me, and it really helped us through that time. And one of the communities, for example, he was a volunteer football coach in the community, and the football players and coaches would come around and say, "We're here for you, Coach Paul." And that was really touching to us. And it made me think I was missing that camaraderie and community in the entrepreneur world. It was very isolating. I found it very isolating in my career and trying to be an entrepreneur. And so I thought, I'm just going to invite other entrepreneurs to lunch one day. And I did that. I wasn't very organized with it at the time. And to my surprise, 50 people showed up. And so this little room I had rented was overflowing. I discovered that for anything to work, you need to be part of a community, because that one group turned into a network. And that network, I ended up with multiple chapters in different cities all throughout my region, because people are looking to connect. And so I had that large network. It became a large network, and I had that for 6 years. And I ended up planning and promoting over 500 events. And we used the platform to help my husband go from an injured mill worker to an international speaker. And so he did a TED Talk and wrote a book about our story, and that we have published on Amazon. So you can find that. It's called Crushed Alive. And one of the things that I discovered was that little football community inspired me in the beginning. And so one of my sayings is drop the hustle and join the huddle. And it's all about joining a community, being involved, connecting, taking time. We don't always feel like leaving the house or leaving our desk and going and connecting with people, but it is so important to the well-being, not only of our business, but of ourselves. We need to have that human connection and community with others, really for anything to work and for our own passions and purpose to become part of the world and to come alive.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, no person is an island. We need to come together. We're better together. Thank you for sharing your story. Again, I think that those type of big things, those big challenges, are the things that make us or break us, that show us what we are and who we are and what we're worth and what we have to offer. So you certainly turned that around into something very wonderful and growth of community. So Women Podcasters Awards, that is coming up, not terribly soon, but it's coming up later this spring, isn't it?
Well, actually, it's a bit earlier this year. The nominations go from February 1st through to the end of April. And then the voting happens from May 1st to May 30th. So the window for voting is a bit shorter. And that was another suggestion that people had and request that people had, was that the voting window be a bit shorter. And so I hope people vote for both of your shows in the awards. Anybody can vote. You don't have to be a podcaster to vote.
That's true. You can be a listener. You can be a fan. The window to vote, a month seems about right. So you are still taking nominations. How can people nominate themselves or a show that they like? I don't want to take too much of your time, but I would like to ask you a few simple favors. First of all, please rate, review, and share this podcast wherever you're listening. It sounds like a simple little thing, and it is, but it has a huge impact for us because it helps other people find us in the podcasting algorithms. I don't know how it works, but I do know that it helps a lot. Next, if you would subscribe or follow wherever you're listening, whether that's YouTube or Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, Pandora, Spotify, wherever you're listening, just hit subscribe or follow, and that helps you and it helps us. It helps you because then you receive notifications when we have a new episode that's out. It helps us because, again, algorithm magic, I don't know what happens, but it helps. And then finally, you can support our podcast in a tangible way by going to radiatewellnesscommunity.com/podcast and then click on support the show. Now, we have a new feature too. We are now on Patreon. You can find us on Patreon. You can also find the link to Patreon when you go to radiatewellnesscommunity.com/podcast. So on Patreon, for $3 a month or $5 a month, you can support your metaphysical and spiritual growth. You can learn about upcoming guests, and you can get early and ad-free versions of the shows. So please support us. This podcast is free for you to listen, but we have costs, and quite frankly, they come out of my pocket. So if you like this content, if you get a lot out of it, please see what you can do to give back. Thank you so much.
Yes, so podcasters can nominate themselves at womenpodcasters.com/awards, or you can just go to womenpodcasters.com and find the awards tab there, and you can submit your nomination. Nominations, the price went up a little bit this year because we found that there was a lot more labor involved in the awards. Last year, it was only $10. This year, it is $25. That's just mainly to cover our costs. I covered most of the expenses last year, which is fine for the first year, but we learned a lot. And so we had to raise the fee a little bit. It's still the lowest fees of most awards. If you think the Webby Awards is hundreds and hundreds to join, for example. And awards are a really good experience to connect with others, like we said, but also if you win, and even if you don't win, if you're a nominee, you can put the nominee badge on your website that you're a nominee. And when you win, you get the winner's badge. And we have lots of content and images that people can share along the way. And again, that creates engagement with their listeners and their audience.
Yes, that is true. I fully used the nominee badge last time around, and it was very helpful. Really make it easy for people who are nominated to get the word out and to provide all of the graphics and everything that look uniform, that look nice across all websites and podcasts. So that's very helpful. Now, in order to nominate ourselves or another podcaster, like, are there any criteria that you look for nominations?
Yeah, for example, so with new and upcoming, as well as seasoned podcasters can join, but you need to have at least 5 published episodes for podcasters. And then for expert guests as well, there's a minimum number of guest interviews that they've had to have done, or guest spots.
Yeah, that's a wonderful thing, because even if you don't have a podcast, you can be a guest expert on somebody else's podcast. And that's a lot of fun. Usually I interview people, but also will be interviewed as well. So this is an exciting opportunity for anybody who's in podcasting, anybody who loves podcast. I'm a podcast junkie. I'm listening all the time. So what's your favorite podcast?
Oh, I love a wide variety. I mean, everything from entertainment. Smartlist is always fun.
Oh, yeah. I love that one.
That's a good one. Yeah. Entertainment. And there's a lot of education. When my husband, after he had his accident, we got into listening to podcasts to learn through recovery. And one of the things that happened was we learned a lot of modalities that helped. And we did that through podcasting a lot. So from listening to podcasts and eventually inspired to do our own podcast. And so podcasts are a place where you can not only connect, but learn a lot. There's a lot of things you can learn through podcasts. All kinds of mindset stuff. You know, we learned about limiting beliefs, right? I mean, that was huge. We've studied manifestation for years through podcasts. We've studied all kinds of modalities that have helped us, affirmations, meditation, all kinds of things that has enriched our lives, all from podcasts.
Right. Of course, when you find out about a new modality, a new expert, someone who's written a book, then that just opens the door so wide to learn more about that. No, podcasts are a wonderful way to get the message out for entertainment, for learning purposes, and for hope. That's why I do the Real Life Angel Encounter podcast, is because we all need a little bit of hope and a little bit of a bright spot in our world. So it is very important for that. All right. So voting opens May 1st, and anybody can vote. There's no criteria for having a vote, having a say.
Exactly. Yes. And I hope they vote for your podcast, because both of your podcasts, because you do such a good job. And one of the other things that really impacted us and that helped my husband through his recovery, helped both of us really, is storytelling. Because when he told his story, it impacted others and encouraged them to tell their story. People would come up to us as a response, telling us their story after a speaking engagement or something like that. And so that inspired us to really dive into storytelling and explore that. And that's what you're doing, is releasing people's stories into the world. And that's just so important.
Thank you. Yeah, I think so too. And when others hear about miraculous encounters, loved one visits, etc., it gives us a little bit of hope that there's more to life that there's
Yes.
unseen worlds around us. Now, your husband, through his recovery, he made a full recovery, didn't he?
Well, he still has some invisible injuries. In fact, his TED Talk was called Silencing Stigma Through Storytelling, and it's about invisible injuries and some of the things that you need to overcome and not just live with, but learn a different way of living through some of the modalities that I mentioned. And so storytelling is a big piece of that. When you learn to tell your own story in a way that impacts others and share what's worked for you, and then that just a ripple effect through the community and through society and helps other people and brings hope, like you said. And it's just so important that we connect in that way through storytelling. I mean, as humans, we've been doing that for a long time, right? So we need to keep that skill and keep that going. And it's so important to provide opportunities like you do for storytelling and getting those stories out there, what's working for people, what's not working, suggestions, recommendations, teaching and learning. It's just so important to everything we do.
And connecting, right?
Yeah.
I've had so many people just reach out and say, hey, I appreciate the opportunity to learn more about our angels or loved ones or any of the guest speakers like you who've been on the Radiate Wellness podcast. I've had some really big names like Dr. Raymond Moody, who studied near-death experiences, and Dr. Eben Alexander, who had famous near-death experience, but also Whitley Strieber, Theo, Sheila and Marcus Gillette, who Sheila channels Theo. So some really important shows and important topics that people tell me that they treasure and they learn a lot from. So it's important. And all of us have that we can share with our audiences, right? So the podcast that you are working on now, what podcast is that?
Well, I have the two podcasts, Inspiring Innovator show that I have with my husband, and then Women in Podcasting show. Perfect. Where we feature the other podcasters, and sometimes I have episodes about monetizing your podcast and different aspects of podcasting and podcasting experts. I've had a number of podcasting experts from the industry who have come on to provide tips and tricks to getting your podcast out there.
Right. You're doing so much for women in podcasting. I can't tell you how appreciative we all are that you put this together, that you exist, that you're doing this, and that you're promoting women in podcasting. It is important.
So thank you so much.
Everything that you're doing. Is great.
Thank you so much. I love connecting with you and all the members. It's just a joy.
Yeah. Is there anything that we've not talked about that you think is important? Anything that we've left out or glossed over?
Well, I just want to encourage people. We identified 3 different mountains in our recovery process, in our journey through this situation. And the first one was mountain mindset. And that's where we brought on a lot of those modalities that we were talking about, the meditation, overcoming limiting beliefs, affirmations, all the things that you talk about, the faith and different things like that. And then the second one is Mount Message. Mm-hmm. And Mount Message is all about your story, learning about your audience if you're in business, and just being able to tell your story with others, whether it's on a platform, on a stage, or just for yourself, journaling. It's so important to engage with your story, to grasp your story and embrace it. And so that's Mount Message. And then the third one is Mount Monetize, for those in your audience who are entrepreneurs, to monetize your skills and expertise, to create extra income from your knowledge and helping others. And it's about serving others. And so each of those mountains, we help our members to scale each of those mountains. The objective is to get to the summit and the peak of each of those mountains. And so we'll have a book coming out about that later this year. But yeah.
How exciting.
Yeah, so we're excited about that. We both have published some books, but this will be everything we learned through this process. And so we're excited about that.
No, I think that's very important. I'd love to have you back to talk about the book when it comes out.
Oh, thank you.
So wonderful. So we can go to
womenpodcasters.com.
womenpodcasters.com for more information, to find out about you and your husband and all the wonderful things you have going on, and to join those groups on Facebook and LinkedIn to network and come together to talk about your businesses, your podcasts, and everything else. And then, of course, nominations open through you said the end of April.
Yes.
And then the voting begins May 1st and lasts all through the month of May.
Yes, and they can find you on there and vote for you.
I will be putting the links out everywhere, absolutely everywhere, with instructions on how to vote. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for joining me once again on the Radiate Wellness podcast. And I look forward to voting myself in the awards.
Oh,
and
thank you so much for having me.
About your book. Oh, absolutely. So happy to have you. Don't know what to watch next? Decisions. Well, we've got some suggestions. You can click this little video here and watch that. It's something that we think you're going to like. If you like the last one, you're going to like that one too. You can also click on the subscribe button. And if you do that, then you'll get notifications whenever we have a new video up. Win-win, right?